So it's Daniel chapter 6, first part of the story. Nice easy story, we might have heard this one before, it's Daniel in the lion's den.
Oh yes.
It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. Satraps were made accountable to them, so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him, because he was trustworthy, and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man, Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God." So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, "May King Darius live forever. The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed." So King Darius put the decree in writing. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room, where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. "Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den?" The king answered, "The decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed." Then they said to the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day." When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, "Remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed." So the king gave the order. And they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, who you serve continually, rescue you." A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. And that's where we're going to leave it. On that cliffhanger. Right. Okay, let's pray. Father, we just commit this time to you, and we just ask that you will give me the right words to say, and it will be you speaking to us, and you speaking to us and letting us know what we need to hear from you. And Lord, we just pray that we will have open ears and hear what you want to tell us. Amen. Amen. Okay, if you've got the notes, you might find them useful. And it's not a mistake that I have got little blanks on them, because that's for the audience participation. So if you've got them, you might want to refer to them, but otherwise, don't worry. Okay. Now, truly, I'm not qualified to do this sermon because I've never been in a lion's den, and I have not been imprisoned for my faith, and I have not even been threatened with violence to stop talking about Jesus. or it would have been worse for me. So I'm not particularly qualified, but then we'll see what God has to say through that. Now, in other countries we know that Christians are persecuted for their faith. And here's the first audience participation. Hands up. Any idea what are the top 10 countries where Christians are persecuted? So it's top 10, it's not in a good way. Top 10 for Christians being persecuted, and this is according to Open Doors in the year 2015. So if you know your Open Doors, you probably know the answer. So let's have any out of the top 10.
North Korea.
North Korea, yes, that is number 1. Well done, well done. Sudan?
Yeah, which was the meat and the...
Yes, Sudan, that is correct. Sudan, yes. Keith, what were you going to say? Saudi Arabia. Not on the top 10. Okay. Anybody else?
Indonesia.
No, not on the top 10, but they're all good answers. Okay, I'll read them to you. In order, this is 2015, in order, North Korea, Somalia, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Sudan, Iran, Pakistan, Eritrea, Nigeria. Okay, but in the UK at present, we don't endure a lot of persecution. We have freedom of religion. But we have to be aware where things are going, because there's this whole idea of British values coming into our society. And from a school perspective, we have to be aware of our school statement on British values. And we support British values, and we support democracy, the rule of law, individual liberty, and respect and tolerance of those with different faiths and beliefs, and for those without faith. Which sounds okay, doesn't it? Until you unpack it a little bit. And I'm just going to read a little bit from our friend Chris Wright, that we went to see in somewhere in Norfolk somewhere. Now, this is a book which you might want to borrow from me. It's called Tested by Fire, and it's a really good book. And it's about Daniel 1-6, so there's quite a lot of really interesting things for our society. So I'm going to just read a teeny bit, really. Teachers in Britain point to the climate of hostility and sometimes the threat of disciplinary action that hangs over any overt Christian faith commitment that can be smeared with charges of indoctrination or intolerance. And this is one I really like this sentence. The only thing one can be dogmatic about in our culture is the prime virtue of not being dogmatic about anything, especially not in front of the children. Okay, and this is so true of our society. I thought that really summed it up. And surprisingly, this book was written in 1993, so it was almost prophetic in how things are going. And you can borrow it, but not till after next week. Because I might need it next week. Okay, so let's look at Daniel quickly. Quite a straightforward story. He carried on praying to God. He broke the law, which Gareth had just made. And he got found out, and he took the consequences. So that's, in a nutshell, basic premise. So, why did it happen? Now then, I must refer you to this superb sermon we had from Lake Forest a few weeks ago on Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, and if you haven't listened to it, you can go onto our new wonderful website and you can click on sermons and find it, and it's very good. And today, I did say at the end of Mike's sermon, okay, I'm just going to pinch that for my sermon because so many things are not the same, really. So I'm going to do a bit more asking the audience, and I'm going to say, put hands up please. Where do you think there are similarities between this story and the story of Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego? Similarities to start with. Obvious ones. Keith?
They refused to bow down to a foreign god.
Refused to bow down to a foreign god, which is basically worship of the king. They refused to do that, yeah.
Well, the king made the law
Yes.
under pressure without realising some of the collateral consequences that would follow.
Yes.
The law wasn't designed for Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, and this one wasn't designed for Daniel, but actually they were the ones caught by it.
Exactly. They were persuaded against, well, they were just persuaded to make a law which would trap the people who wanted to worship the true God. Alan.
It was a result of people plotting against people believing in God both times.
Yes. Bad people were out to get the good people. Yeah? Yes. Keith?
Okay, the king had too big an ego.
Perfect. In both cases, the king was full of pride, and he succumbed to the flattery of these satraps, which is a great word. I love satraps. Maddie?
Well, it's a very similar part of the world, isn't it? But under different names in those days, like Iraq and Iran, this around the Middle East, where they're going out today on Israel.
Very good. Okay.
Very much similar.
You're going off on a tangent, but it's a very good tangent. So that's really good. Right, moving on to where are there differences in the stories? There are some obvious differences, and then there's some really subtle differences. So let's see if you can get some of the obvious ones. Really, really obvious.
One was Daniel, one was Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego.
Perfect, that's the sort of thing I'm looking for.
Different
kings. Different king, that's, yes. One was Nebuchadnezzar, one was Darius, very good. Yes, anything else?
Different punishments, one was fire, one was lion.
Excellent, that's very good, yes.
Yeah, one was intellectual in the sense of don't bow down to, you can't pray to anything apart from Darius. Right? And one was a physical statue, so you're actually praying to an image and you have to bow down to an actual image. So one was more ethereal and one was more physical.
Very good. Right, I'm going to develop that as well. Good.
And actually, sort of one lot were commanded to do something, the other one was commanded not to do something, but in either case it was actually contrary to what the Lord had told them. So.
Very good, yes. Very good. You're a good audience. Excellent. You're really on board. And there's a couple of different ones. Darius tries to save Daniel. He actually goes away and thinks about how he can save Daniel because he realises he's been tricked into making a law. And that's a contrast with Nebuchadnezzar, who was absolutely furious that the three guys would not bow down to the statue. And he made it 7 times hotter. So he was really angry and wanted them punished, whereas Darius wanted to save Daniel. Okay. And another fairly subtle one is the law could not be revoked in the second story because it's the law of the Medes and Persians which cannot be revoked, because this is not the same situation as under the Babylonians, which was under Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, so it's slightly different. Okay, we're going to move on to some less obvious ones. I think you've got quite a few of these, actually. Very good. Right, here's a really good one you haven't mentioned yet. Daniel was an old man by the time he went into the lion's den. We can go into all the details of all the dates if you want to, we can cover that later. But by a lot of reckoning, he was about 81 when he went into... He'd been there a long time, he'd served under several different kings. Remember, he went into the Babylonian Empire when he was 15. But all this time has passed. He is now about 81. So he's a different, slightly different, you know. And, you know, he wasn't there for an easy life. He was still serving in the civil service. He was still serving. He was still worshipping. He was still doing what God wanted him to do. He wasn't retiring. He wasn't sort of sitting back and watching EastEnders and joining the National Trust.
We joined the National Trust.
But he was there, he was serving God just as he always had done. Okay. So that's one of the less obvious ones. And the other one is one that I'm picking up from what Fiona said. He wasn't actually ordered to do something. Yeah? He was ordered not to do something. And here's a question for you to ponder. Is it easier to say no when you're ordered to do something, like worship this big golden statue? That's a very straightforward command. You don't do it, yeah? Is it easier to say no? Is it more difficult to not do something? Because he could have pretended, okay? He could have pretended that he wasn't praying. He could have gone to a different part of his room. He didn't have to be right in front of the windows, you know? He could have prayed without kneeling down, possibly. He could have prayed standing up. He could have prayed silently. Yeah? Lots of things he could have done to make it appear that he was obeying the law, okay? But he chose not to. Also, the law was only there for 30 days. So he could have said, 30 days, God doesn't mind that much, you know? God understands. I don't need to do this for 30 days. I'll have a little holiday and I'll, get back to normal in 30 days' time. So he did make a choice there, yeah? He made a choice to not. Not. Yes, he made a choice to carry on praying, that's the main thing. Okay, so moving on to us. Right, got a couple of things to think about here. What about us? So, when it gets tough, what do? Do we keep our heads down behind the parapet and pretend to be the same as everybody else?
Yes.
Very honest. Is it very tempting to want to fit in with what everyone else is doing, what everyone else is saying? Okay, we'll go back to a little story about me, which is a sort of bit of a peculiar story, but there you go. I think I work in a very secular environment, and the general assumption in the school where I work, both staff and students, is that Christianity is out of date and that science has disproved God, and it's all irrelevant. Occasionally, I get the chance to say something about the real God, what Jesus is, who he is really, or about real Christianity. And one example was when we had our training on British values, and we were doing some follow-up sessions in briefings in the staff room, and it was the turn of the science department, and they had to introduce ethical issues for the consideration of staff, and they decided we were going to talk about research on embryos, fertilised embryos, but which had been removed, yeah? Because could they be used for research in order to improve the medical situation and possibly, collect some cells or something? So what did we think about research and experimenting on human embryos? Okay, they had been fertilised, but they were, nothing, less than a pinprick. This was quite clever in the science department because they decided we were all going to take part and we all had, little role play things. So they gave out little cards, and some people were parents of the child who had a serious disease which could be helped by research and experimentation. Some people were medical professionals, and some people were people of faith. So my heart was thumping, and lo and behold, my little envelope said I was a person of faith. So I was in a small group of people with faith, and we were supposed to give the perspective of people with faith. And the people I was with sort of fudged it completely. One of them said, from a religious viewpoint, he believed that they shouldn't be experimenting on embryos because the population was too big anyway, so it would, decrease the surplus population, to quote a little bit of Christmas Carol. And I thought, this is not going well. So I grabbed the ball thing that you have to speak, and I took a deep breath and said, I believe that it was wrong to experiment on human embryos because they have the potential to be human life, and therefore all life was sacred, and it was wrong to experiment and treat them as if they were just them old cells of any sort. Now, I expected to get quite a bit of flack from this. Of course, everyone was there in the staff room looking at me, and I expected a lot of come back in the corridors or, arguments. Funnily enough, I got none, and I also felt that I was the only Christian in the whole school. And funnily enough, I wasn't, because the next day I met this South African chap, and he turned out that we started talking, and he goes to church in Peterborough, and he's a Christian. So sometimes we think we're being put under the hot spot, but we're not really, We get all het up about things, and then it occurred to me that it's not always when we're put on the hot spot that we have to be true to our faith. Sometimes it's just that ordinary stuff. The ordinary stuff, like when people are gossiping about somebody else, you don't join in the gossip, but you try and say something nice about that person, or talk about the weather, or something. And, the ordinary things, okay? Right, I'll come back to that. And what about us? Do we sometimes write ourselves off? Do we sometimes say, well, I'm too old? Do we sometimes say, I'm not educated, or I'm not good at talking? Or do we say, well, actually, I'm not very important and I'm not sure what I'm talking about, so don't listen to me, sort of thing? We shouldn't do that. We should just be ourselves, be the best version of ourselves that God wants us to be. Sometimes, like Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, we have to refuse to do something. And again, I'm thinking in the workplace, we can refuse to do things that are a little bit wrong, like taking a few paper clips home, that sort of thing, or having a sickie, because you've got a bit of a headache and don't want to go in. Things like that. We can refuse to do the small things that people do that are wrong. Sometimes we have to make a stand and do something. Sometimes we have to say what we believe. Sometimes we have to carry on worshipping, even if it's not going to be very nice if we carry on worshipping. And I want to think how this relates to what we've been studying in spiritual warfare. We've been looking a lot at spiritual warfare in quite a lot of detail. So I'm going to have a show of hands, but I do not want any preacher raising their hand at this point. No preacher raising their hands. What is the armour of God? Preachers sitting on the hands, well done. Anything that's in the armour of God, and I'm talking about Ephesians 6.
Helmet of salvation.
That's very good. Come back to you, you'll obviously know more. Fiona?
Belt of truth.
Excellent. Belt of truth, yes. Maddie?
Shield of faith.
Shield of faith, that's 3, good. Keep going.
Sword of the Spirit.
Sword of the Spirit, excellent. Yeah.
Shoes of the gospel of peace.
Excellent, very good. Any more? I think we've got them, have we?
Breastplate of righteousness.
Breastplate of righteousness, very good. So you do listen, that's good. Just check in, that's good. And the reason we've been doing this is not just so that you can answer the questions, like today, and you get 10 points for getting a quiz mark, It's so we can actually do it, So we actually put these things on daily. We put these things on. We read the Bible daily. We meditate on the Bible. And I've got quite a lot of Bible verses here that we can meditate on, and you can find them for yourself. You can use Bible Gateway, which is on the internet, and if you think, I want to know something about salvation, you can put in salvation, and you get lots and lots of verses, and you can really learn some verses and meditate on them, and make them part of how you think, and how you are, and how you are every day.
Could I just ask for a definition of what meditation is?
Yes, certainly. Okay. A meditation means to chew it over, that you read it, think about it, maybe look up the word in a Bible concordance or something, but you meditate it. You can learn scriptures and remember those scriptures, and then those scriptures are part of what you believe and part of who you are. And so I've got some of them here, but they're on the take-out sheets. Be ready to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. It's quite nice, that last bit. That's in 1 Peter 3. Keep this book of the law always on your lips and meditate on it day and night. And that's about how we should spend time reading the Bible and thinking it over, chewing it over, yeah? Pray in the Spirit at all times and on every occasion. Stay alert and be persistent in your prayers. Again, that's the end of the armour of God bit. And a bit from Martin Luther, which he might not have said, but he probably might not have said it. And it's, here I stand, I can do no other. And that's a really good one to hold on to. When you put in the firing line, or, you know, the potential lion's den thing, I can do no other. I am who I am. I am a child of God. This is who I am. I can do no other. I'm going to read a tiny bit of a passage from my other book, which is about some girls who have been persecuted in modern day Iran. And I like this because, lots of things, and I can lend it out. Partly because Darius, remember, was Medo-Persian, yeah? And ancient Persia is the same as modern day Iran, same place, okay? I'm just going to read a tiny bit. The whole thing is about how they were imprisoned for their faith, okay? Despite our earlier bravado, we were afraid. For all we knew, this could be our last day on earth. We held hands and prayed to the Lord to calm our hearts. Our greatest fear was that we would break and say things outside of God's will. We prayed for strength. We wanted our captors to see that we were confident and brave. If we are tortured, give us the power to stand fast. Praying made us feel better. Famished and exhausted, we fell asleep, even as we waited for the sound of death at the door. The rattle of the key in the lock woke me with a start. Mariam and I held each other silently as footsteps approached, but instead of the rough-looking character we expected, a female guard came in with 2 young women, both of them crying. The women were sisters who had been arrested for using GoldQuest, an internet business networking site that had been banned in Iran. After allowing us to pray for them, one of them said, "You were like angels in this place. How do you stay so calm and strong?" "It isn't our strength," I explained. "Only the Lord is strong enough to get us through this." Within an hour or two, we were talking like lifelong friends. We held hands and prayed together. When we finished, the sisters kept right on praying. So like I say, if you want to borrow this book, I've just finished it, and it's really interesting. And that's sort of everything I want to say, really. We can learn from these stories in the book of Daniel, and we can hold on to what we believe in times of persecution, in times of any sort of threat. We can hold on to what we believe through God's grace in us. Let's pray. God, we just thank you for your word. We thank you for all the stories of all the Old Testament characters long, long, long ago, Lord. But Lord, we can see how they are still relevant to us today. Thank you for the way you teach us day by day. And thank you that you are always with us, in good times and in bad. Amen.
Amen.